What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with the 10th episode of Dynasty Decisions. We've gotten so much support on this series that we have to split this into 2 episodes because we have, 20 or so questions from you guys. And if you guys want to be featured on a future episode, you guys know the drill. Join the Discord, DM us on there. You can DM us on Twitter to have your question, your team, your trade, your rookie, draft situation evaluated live on this episode of Dynasty Decisions. If you guys enjoy this video at any point, I encourage you guys to go down to the bottom, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Danny, how are you doing today?
Doing well. And yeah, you guys showed so much support for the series. We had to double up on it this week. Heck, myself, I got like 14, 15 questions from you guys. I love that you guys are able to reach out, confident in getting your teams on these episodes. And keep doing it because the more you guys show support, the more this series is going to grow, the more we're going to be putting this out. So make sure if you're watching this already, again, we're about a minute and a half in, smash that like button so we can see you guys enjoy this. But anyways, before we get into that first team, we're going to hit the intro. Okay, so Corey, you can start it off. Read off BBowlofficial's team and question that he has here for us.
Right, and if you guys want your question answered as fast as possible on these Dynasty Decisions episode, please organize your question and your team like B-Bowl did, right? You guys can see on the screen, he not only did he include all of his players organized neatly in an Excel format for us, he actually put how old they are and how many years of experience they have in the NFL. So we really appreciate that. It saves us a lot of time setting up these show sheets and organizing them for this episode. So you guys can see everything on the screen there. It's a PPR league. It's a super flex. He's wondering basically what he should do with Travis Etienne. Apparently he's gotten a lot of interest on Travis Etienne. And also because he has 3, I would say, startable tight ends between Noah Fant, Tyler Higbee, and Jonnu Smith. He's wondering if he should target some of the guys in his league that are, supposedly lacking at that position and what kind of, value he can get for a guy like Tyler Higbee or a guy like Jonnu Smith. And then overall an outlook on his team, how competitive he's going to be this year, and maybe some ways that he can improve his longevity and his competitiveness.
Yeah, for sure. So looking at that team straight now, again, you mentioned it right there. And the 2 kind of things that we're looking at here, again, he mentions that he's gotten a lot of interest on ETN and has also looked at how competitive he can be this year and ways he can improve. Mentioning quickly, you got Joe Burrow, you got Patrick Mahomes, you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, maybe even Travis Etienne. Those are really interesting pieces. Again, if you were to put them on the market, if you were to kind of see what you could get for them. And in general, you have a lot of flexibility with this roster. If you want to be able to contend, you have to go for a more win now approach here. And if you want to prolong it a year, I do think this team has translatability in terms of being a 2022 top contender if you make a few moves in increasing that overall strength of the roster.
Right. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, is that this is probably a 2022 team. And the reason is because it doesn't look like you have a lot of depth, which is likely going to have to come, next offseason. Maybe you trade some guys, maybe some guys on your team emerge or something, or you just are looking to replenish, another running back or another wide receiver in next year's draft, in next year's rookie draft. So I wouldn't force it. I wouldn't go out and be like, trade Patrick Mahomes and, get a bunch of depth for him, because that's usually never a smart idea. You always want studs on your team. I would just be patient, see how well you can contend this year. Maybe you're picking 6th in your rookie draft because you just missed the playoffs or something like that. And then you can add another, cornerstone running back or wide receiver to your roster this time next year. And 2022 is really when I would look to make that push, because it looks like you are going to be lacking at running back depth, wide receiver depth, and quarterback depth as well, because you have Ryan Fitzpatrick as your QB3 right now. And Kellen Mond's a nice young piece, but you don't have a solidified QB3 at the moment. So I would just be patient with this roster. I don't think it's smart to just, go ahead and sell some of like Chris Godwin, I guess, would be your oldest elite asset on your roster. I wouldn't just sell him, for example. And Robert Woods, you're about to bring him up. I wouldn't sell him either, to be honest.
If you can get a 1 for Robert Woods, I'll take the 1 over him straight now. Right now.
I don't think anyone's going to give you a 1 for him.
There are people in a win now potential, like say you're mid-season, say there's a guy who needs a wide receiver too because his guy went down, we'll give you his first round pick for Robert Woods. And in that scenario, you snatch that up all day, every day. As much as I like Robert Woods, the player, we're talking about a 29-year-old wide receiver too. versus a first round pick, which is the most appreciating asset in all of fantasy football, it's not even close for me. I'm taking that first round pick and I'm running with it. And if you're able to get that type of deal, you do that yesterday.
Right. And my only thing is how feasible is that, right? If, like Danny just mentioned, if you're mid-season and you find an opportunity to acquire draft capital, take it, because your team, while it's good, I don't think this is a bad team by any means, is probably not a top 5 or 3 team in your league, which is usually what you want to be shooting for if you want a reasonable chance to contend year in and year out. So I would look to acquire draft capital where you can. But again, like I said, don't force it. Don't sell Patrick Mahomes for like 3 firsts just because you need draft capital.
Absolutely. So anything else you want to add on this team, or can we go on to TomJonHen?
Real quick on the tight ends, because he did ask about what he should do with those tight ends. Again, I don't think you're going to get much for Tyler Higbee or for Jonnu Smith. I don't imagine anyone's giving you like even a second rounder probably for those guys. If I were you, what I would target for those guys is some upside at wide receiver or running back. So if you can acquire a guy like, I don't know, maybe you can package Tyler Higbee in like a 3rd round pick and acquire a back end RB2 type. Maybe you could somehow get like a Ronald Jones or a Damian Harris or something on the lower end of the RB2 spectrum for a guy like Tyler Higbee if someone really believes in them. Or you could target Tyler Higbee. You could go out and target a young receiver that maybe underperformed as like a 2nd-year receiver, or a rookie receiver like, Elijah Moore or Rondell Moore or something like that. You might be able to swing for one of your tight ends, either Higbee or Jonnu. But I would hold on to Fan. I would not trade him.
Absolutely. So, let's go on to the next team. I think we pretty much covered it here. This is more of a 2022 window. So if you can, try to get younger, try to improve that long-term stability. Specifically, I'm looking at Woods, as you mentioned, Higbee as well. I think those are both movable assets to strengthen that core for your team.
That could be a mid-season thing too, right? With the tight ends, you might want to, especially when the season approaches and that person in your league that is starting Gerald Everett or whoever the hell they have in their tight end slot, they might panic, right? They might be like, I need a better tight end than this. And they might be willing to overpay and give you, a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick for Tyler Higbee. And that I would probably take for him, to be honest.
Yep, absolutely. So TomJonHen, you guys can see it on the screen. Take it away with this deal right now, and overall the scenario that he is faced with as the league commissioner.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I don't know if we've gotten a question like this, but real quick on this philosophy, he's basically asking, should this trade be vetoed, right? And my philosophy is I never want to see trades vetoed unless it is clear and obvious, like these guys are cheating. I'm never going to veto a trade, because if I can envision a scenario in which the trade works out for both sides, then it's a fair trade, in my opinion. And in this trade, I can absolutely envision a scenario that it works out for both sides. On the left side, you can see this is clearly a win now team. They're acquiring an older quarterback, an older wide receiver, a wide receiver and a running back that are in their primes right now in Amari Cooper and Alvin Kamara, and just a late round pick. And they're trading away more questionable young assets, right? Clyde Edwards-Helaire, as much as I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's not going to outperform Alvin Kamara this year. Jalen Hurts, as much as I think he's a pretty solid piece, we don't know what his long-term future is. So those assets are not as valuable in the long term, at least from a raw fantasy points. How many fantasy points are they going to put up than Amari Cooper, Alvin Kamara, and Julio Jones? So I understand why the win now team would make a trade like this. I personally think the other team won the trade because we're looking at a super flex league that is a 14-teamer. So we're talking about a very valuable quarterback situation, right? And he got the better quarterback in the deal, right? Because he got Jalen Hurts, who's far superior to Ben Roethlisberger. And not only that 107, the guy, TomJonHen, told me that 107 became Zach Wilson. So we got 2 quarterbacks out of that deal, and 2 young quarterbacks at that. So I would absolutely take his side of the deal. I think he won the trade, especially if you're, going to shift to more of a rebuild mindset. This is exactly what you want to try and do, right? Trade Alvin Kamara and Amari Cooper. They have very high values right now. Acquire some young talent and some picks. So I really like it for both sides. I would absolutely not veto this trade as the commissioner. And apparently their league was going back and forth about it for a while after the trade happened.
Yeah, I'm glad it wasn't vetoed again. Am I saying that this is a fair trade? No, it wasn't a fair trade. But can I envision a scenario where Alvin Kamara is the RB1 this year, Amari Cooper's a top 10 wide receiver, Julio Jones is a solid wide receiver too, and Big Ben has a last hurrah as a top 24-ish type quarterback? Yeah, I can see that. And in that case, I mean, hey, if they will help you win a championship, albeit, again, I'm not saying this is a deal I would take, but this is not a deal that I would veto, because quite simply, there's enough value going back the other way to at least make it a plausible case for that guy to defend his rationale on why he made this deal.
Right. And I mean, if you win the championship, that's all the proof you need that the trade was a good trade, right? Even if only a couple of these pieces help him, right? Let's say Julio Jones gets injured. He doesn't even help him at all. But if Amari Cooper and Alvin Kamara help you win the championship, then you're good. Like the trade was worth it. So we'll move on to the next team. We got Cell's team. And again, we always appreciate you organizing these in Excel format because it's really easy for us to just copy and paste into this document to put on the screen for you guys. So Cell's team is a 10-team league, 2 quarterback, half PPR, tight end premium. So a full PPR for tight ends, and it's IDP league. We don't do IDP, so we're not going to give any advice on that. But he said he just drafted this team, right? The startup just finished. He was the 10th pick in a 10-team league, and the startup draft included both rookies and veterans in it. He's asking if he should make any moves to make his team more flexible. It looks like he can compete, and I would agree. He's got 2 of the top. I don't even know how he got both of these QBs in a 2 quarterback league. How did you get Josh Allen and Kyler Murray on one team? Because they both should be top 8 picks.
He had the 10th pick in the startup, so I'm assuming he got them at 10 and 11.
Yeah, I guess he must have. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. See, this team can compete, right? He's got Najee Harris too. Unfortunately, there's some news that came out about Najee Harris today, but I mean, he's still a workhorse caliber running back. He got a couple solid running backs behind him. That is not Javonte Williams, I don't think. I think it's Jamal Williams.
Even if I'll just quickly say one thing. So if my math is right, his first 4 rounds were Josh Allen and Kyler Murray on the 10-11 turn, and then George Kittle and freaking Najee Harris in the tight end premium on the 3-4 turn, 3-12 to 401, or the 3-10 to 401. What is your league doing letting you get that type of value?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you killed your draft for sure. And you set your team up to be, and it looks like, and when you look at his wide receiver core too, he has a good mix of people that can help him win now with Sutton and Landry and even Deontay Johnson, who's still young, but is in his prime right now. And he's got a lot of exciting young pieces behind that with Jalen Waddle, with Rondell Moore, with Darnell Mooney, and some of those guys. So I really like what this guy did with his team. I think, honestly, I probably wouldn't make any moves to upgrade this team. I probably wouldn't do anything. The only thing I would do is that if you find yourself, because I would say wide receiver is your weakest position in terms of high-end talent. If you get yourself into a situation where you're 5-1 at week 7, and you want to go out and inquire about a guy like Julio Jones if he is on a rebuilding team's roster, or another older receiver like Robert Woods or something like that, I would potentially make a move of that nature and move one of your picks in that situation. But again, I wouldn't force it. I think you can win the championship this year with this team.
Yep, 100%. Again, just that receiver. You can only have Landry listed as your wide receiver 3, although I do think Waddle's going to take that reign by the end of the season. I would still look for a more stable option. I mean, again, if somebody's willing to sell low on a Julio Jones because of his age, like that type of win now receiver, I think could do you well. This is a team that is ready to win now, ready to really make a push. I know we're not into IDP, but I'm smart enough from a real football sense to understand that having Myles Garrett, Jalen Smith, who's just a tackle machine, and freaking Jamal Adams and Kevin Byard as your main defensive pieces. I don't know what the scoring is for your IDP, but from face value, from a surface level, that looks like a really good IDP lineup as well.
Right. Okay. So we'll move on to the next team, and that's Speed Kills. It took me like 10 minutes to figure out how to pronounce this guy's name, but I figured it out. So this is a 12-team Superflex PPR. And again, thank you for organizing it in Excel format for us. On the screen, you guys can see his team. He's got, a very good team, in my opinion. This is even better than the previous team that we looked at. And his questions basically are the thoughts on his team comp. Should he make any moves? Running back depth or a top wide receiver? Should he go after either of those kind of positions? And if so, who should he use and who might be a good target to move in that kind of trade? I would say don't do anything. Sit pat. Your team is phenomenal. You can win the championship this year. You have 2 quarterbacks who are in my top 9 redraft rankings at the quarterback position, plus Joe Burrow, who's like my QB 12. So I think you're good at that position. At running back, you have my RB1 in redraft. You have a top 10 running back for me in redraft. And Myles Gaskin, I think, is a decent RB2 this year. And then at wide receiver, you start 4 wide receivers, assuming that you're flexing 2 of them. And I mean, I guess your wide receiver 4 is semi-weak, but between Cooks, Marquise Brown, Henry Ruggs, even Brashad Perriman and Terrace Marshall, you might be able to figure out that position more weeks than not. And then the top 3 guys that you have should be good. And then again, you have Darren Waller too. You have some good young pieces on your taxi squad as well. I probably wouldn't do anything. If you wanted to do something, if you wanted to go out and acquire another receiver, for example, or another running back, the only thing I would consider doing
trade deadline
is, but maybe at the trade deadline, also you could use Joe Burrow. And when I say Joe Burrow, like don't trade your QB3 for like not another quarterback in return, because then you'll be, kind of hamstringing yourself. But if you could downgrade from Joe Burrow to a rookie quarterback like a Justin Fields or a Zach Wilson or a Trey Lance or something like that, and also get a wide receiver or a running back on top of that, then I would consider making a move like that. But like I said, don't force it. Your team is good enough to compete this year.
If you could get any of that, you take it and you run, because I have them all in the same tier as Burrow. So if you get
right, but I would think the general consensus would be that you wouldn't want Zach Wilson or Justin Fields over Joe Burrow, right? Like I think most people would agree they'd rather have Joe Burrow.
I mean, I have Fields.
I don't agree either, but I would say most people probably would rather have Joe Burrow.
Okay, yeah. If you can do that, you take it and run. But overall, this is a very good team. And yeah, maybe you look for a replacement for maybe Cooks in the starting lineup. Aside from that, I mean,
if you could somehow get Zach Wilson and Chase Claypool for Joe Burrow, would you take that?
Easily, yesterday.
Yeah. So if you could swing a deal like that, then I would consider doing it, because then you still have a young quarterback who's your QB3. Tannehill and Kyler are going to be your starting quarterbacks this year. Like Joe Burrow is not seeing your lineup. Let's be honest here. As much as they're going to throw the ball in Cincinnati, I highly doubt he's going to outscore either of Kyler or Tannehill this year.
Yeah, I agree. Overall, again, you're in a very solid spot and you crushed your draft. So I feel like we can get into the next team. That's going to be TBBucs. So go for it.
Yeah, and shout out TBBucs. He's obviously a Bucks fan, and he actually sent me a picture in the DMs. He's got like some Leonard Fournette gloves, because he knows somebody that was working at the Packers facility after the NFC Championship game, and they snagged Leonard Fournette's game-worn gloves from the facility. So that's pretty cool. Anyway,
they gave it to him.
Yeah, he's got him. He sent me a picture of him. Yeah. So it looks like he's in a tiered PPR, right? He's got 0.2 points per rush, 1 PPR for running backs, 1.25 PPR for wide receivers, and a 2 PPR for tight ends. So tight ends very valuable in this format. It sort of balances out the positions, relatively speaking, because we know that running backs are very overvalued, and a lot of these formats are starting to creep up to undervalue them a little bit more than they already are and balance the playing field for wide receivers. So you can see on the screen right now, his team, it was a startup 10 team super flex, and his starters are in bold there. And this is his final product, right? This is what his team looks like right now. He made 3 trades to get to this point, and he basically wants our thoughts on the trades that he made. So you can see he's got a lot of studly young options on his team. The first trade that he made, and me and Danny kind of disagree on this one, Calvin Ridley, he traded away Calvin Ridley for Jerry Jeudy, a 2022 first and a 2022 second. Now, I would have kept Ridley. I think Ridley is worth more than Jeudy plus a first and a second. I think Calvin Ridley is a bona fide top 8 wide receiver in Dynasty. And as much as I love Jerry Jeudy, I think Jerry Jeudy is basically the same type of player as Calvin Ridley. And I think his ceiling is, just as high as Calvin Ridley once the Denver Broncos figure out their QB situation. But that's easier said than done. Jerry Jeudy displayed some drops. He displayed some inconsistencies. I'm not ready to put him in that category of a good enough piece plus a first-round pick to go out and acquire Calvin Ridley. Plus, given the state of your team, I think you can win right away. So Calvin Ridley, to me, would have helped you potentially win your league this year. If you would have had your wide receiver core, Calvin Ridley, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore, I think you probably would have been better suited to just keep Calvin Ridley, but I understand why you made the trade. Gives you some flexibility, gives you another asset that you can use, in the future with that first round pick in 2022, and you also have a second rounder on top of it.
The way I look at it is, again, like I've cited multiple times, I do believe that Judy's going to be able to step up, be a wide receiver 2 or better in terms of his potential this year. And yes, Ridley, don't get me wrong, is a bona fide stud, is a wide receiver, top 6 wide receiver locked and loaded this year, top 10 wide receiver for me in Dynasty. I believe he's my wide receiver 8. But the way I look at it is, anytime I can sell high on a wide receiver, I'm taking that deal. And looking at the package here, you got Jeudy, who's currently going around 3 rounds after Calvin Ridley. You got Jerry Jeudy. You got a first-round pick, which is, we'll say for Pete's sake, that it's a mid to late first. So let's say in a 10-team league, that you're looking at around the 107, all right? And you're also getting the 207 out of it. The way I look at this, it's going to be Jerry Jeudy. You got a plentiful quarterback class next year and a couple nice young running backs as well. And if you didn't get either of them, guess what? You still got a George Pickens. You still got a John Mechie type to be able to fill.
And you can always move that pick too.
Yeah. And in general, the way I look at it, this is the cheapest that you're going to be getting those first and second round picks. And as good as Calvin Ridley is, there's no way I'm passing up a package of that much appreciating value with Jeudy, with that first, with that second, because you could be turning Calvin Ridley in a year. Let's just say hypothetically that guy's team goes wrong. he could be a top 4 pick. He could be a top 5 pick, especially in a 10-team league. It's so easy for teams to look at, or guys to look at their team, say, oh my God, yeah, this is the championship contender. But guess what? In a 10-team league, a lot of teams are going to look like the best team in the league. Because guess what? There's 10 teams in the league. Your team should be better than the normal. So overall, again, the guy that made this move, as good as Calvin Ridley is, might be overestimating where that pick is going to be. And if that's the case, again, I'm expecting it to be around 107 or later. But maybe you strike gold. Maybe that hits the 105. Maybe that hits the 106. And a relatively deep class next year that can net you a huge return going into 2022. And you mentioned here he has 3 first-round picks in 2022. This is a guy who, yes, he could probably have competed this year. I do agree. But I think with those 3 picks next year, he is probably locked and loaded if he handles that situation right, if he handles those draft capital right, to be the best overall team in 2022 and on. So that's why I do lean the package. But again, there's no shame in going out and acquiring a guy like Calvin Ridley because he is a bona fide superstar in fantasy football.
Right. And I'm all for punting for future picks, right? I'm all for, keeping flexibility and making sure that I'm able to win in the future. At some point, you got to try and win the championship. And to me, this is when you should have taken that point because your team is very good. Like, you have guys that I believe in this year, going forward, in the future, like some really good options. So let's get into the second trade that he made. And this was another trade that I think is more, I probably was more likely to make this trade than I would the first trade, just because I believe in Ridley a lot more than this player. But he traded Kareem Hunt straight up for a 2022 first. And I would say that's probably a wash, given the fact that his team is ready to compete. If he wasn't ready to compete, that's an absolutely phenomenal return for Kareem Hunt. But given that your team's ready to compete, I actually do think it's about an even trade. In a 10-team league, though, like you said, if that's the 107, 108, 109, 110, you're probably looking at, you basically traded Kareem Hunt for a nice young running back or potentially a quarterback. And in that situation, I definitely would have, I definitely would prefer the package there, or the pick that you got.
Yep, absolutely. Again, this is a smash of a deal in my opinion. As much as I like Kareem Hunt, I think he's a very fine running back. Listen, the upside of Kareem Hunt is what? Only if Nick Chubb gets hurt, and even if Nick Chubb stays on the field.
I still think Kareem Hunt's going to be a bona fide top 20 running back this year, whether Nick Chubb gets hurt or not.
He was RB22 on points per game last year, and Nick Chubb missed time. Like, what is the upside here? Yeah, okay, maybe he's RB20, RB19, but I don't see a scenario, unless Chubb were to miss the majority of the season, where he could be a bona fide top 12, top 14 type back. I just don't see it otherwise. And if that's the case, I'm getting a 2022 first-round pick in a 10-team league for that ambiguity, that amount of question marks, and for the structure of your current team. Again, other than really CMC, you got a lot of good appreciating assets that should be entering or nearing their prime in 2022, 2023. I love this move for you. And again, if you turn that 2022 first and say that turns into a Breece Hall, an Isaiah Spiller, one of those quarterbacks talking about Howell, Rattler, one of those guys, or
you could even trade it mid-season too. Like, if you're competing mid-season, right? Let's say Trevor Lawrence comes out and he's phenomenal, right? He's Justin Herbert 2.0. And you're like, I can win this year. Like, I can absolutely win this year. And you wanted to take that 2022 first and send it to the Amari Cooper owner, the Mike Evans owner, somebody who has a receiver that's like, 27, 28 years old, like in their prime, and they're looking to rebuild, and you wanted to go acquire one of those guys. Well, then you essentially traded Kareem Hunt for Amari Cooper or Mike Evans, which I would gladly take either of those receivers over Kareem Hunt.
Yep, absolutely. So, and then we can quickly go over this last trade. And
this one's not close. Not close. He won this trade by a mile.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting a guy in. So the trade right here is going to be Courtland Sutton. He gave up in exchange for Jacoby Myers and DJ Moore. Even if we take
he gave up Sutton and Myers for DJ Moore.
Oh, okay. Regardless, DJ Moore is a top 12 to 13. I think he's either my wide receiver 12 or 13 currently in Dynasty. And as much as I love Courtland Sutton, like, Jacoby Myers is probably worth an early third, mid-third type round pick. Like, he's a solid depth piece, but he's nothing more than that. And the fact that you're upgrading to DJ Moore, who was 11th in the league in receiving yards last year on 118 targets, who now plays with the best quarterback of his career in the second season of a Joe Brady system. I think DJ Moore legitimately has top 7 or 8 upside this year. And as much as I love Courtland Sutton, he's never going to have that type of upside.
Right. And both guys have quarterback question marks, right? I have way more faith in Sam Darnold than I have in Drew Lock. And I have way more faith in the Panthers front office and coaching staff to figure out their quarterback situation, even if Sam Darnold falls flat on his face this year. and DJ Moore is, he disappoints again because his quarterback play is terrible, they're going to have a high pick. They're going to pick a quarterback early. And then at that point, you got DJ Moore attached to an exciting young quarterback. And DJ Moore is a guy that we've already seen produce with bad quarterbacks. So I don't even think his floor is that low regardless. Probably doesn't have the highest of a ceiling right now. But like you said, this team is ready to be the best team in the league in 2022. And I think DJ Moore's peak value starts next year. Right. Absolutely. So if you're going to align your roster with when you're going to be competing, DJ Moore is the perfect guy to go out and acquire right now. And I also think Cortland Sutton could also be, aligned in that 2022 range as well. But I have more question marks about the situation surrounding Sutton than I do about DJ Moore.
Yep, absolutely. So other than that, he basically just says here, what kind of like other moves are you thinking about? And honestly, I would just stay put for now. Maybe you can kind of see what's happening with CMC if somebody's willing to give up the farm. Say hypothetically somebody's at the trade deadline and Antonio Gibson maybe has a slow start to the year, or maybe he was dealing with a turf toe a little bit, and you can get like Antonio Gibson 2 firsts for CMC. Like, take that in a heartbeat, in my opinion. As much as I love CMC, listen, Antonio Gibson is going to be a very good running back in his own right. And again, if you can get a 2022 and a 2023 first and really stock up and get this team ready to be a dynasty, pun intended, in those later years, I'm doing that type of move any day of the week.
Right. Yeah. And again, don't force it with CMC because you have a good enough team that you could absolutely win this year. Even with your team the way it is, you have 3-2 or 3-1s next year. You could still win the championship this year if a couple things break right. Mainly your quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. If he comes out and plays like Justin Herbert, you could absolutely win this year.
Absolutely. So we can go on to the next team and take it away with Dirtbagobito.
Yeah, this dude just ran roughshod on his league, man. Like this, I would love to spend a lot of time on your team because you clearly, took advantage of some lesser experienced dynasty players. But I think we got to give more just due to some rebuilding situations, and we're going to get into one right after this. But this is the end product of his team, right? You can see it on the screen right now. He's got Tannehill, he's got Zach Wilson, he's got J.K. Dobbins. This is a 1 quarterback league. So, having all those 4 quarterbacks that he has isn't as valuable, obviously, as if it was a super flex. But he's got some great young pieces, right? You can see that this is a rebuilding team. He's got J.K. Dobbins, Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, Devontae Smith, Zach Wilson to build around in the future. But look at the draft capital that this dude has, right? He's got 4 2022 firsts, 5 2023 firsts, 4 2024 firsts. So he's got, 13 first-round picks in the next 3 years. Like, that is phenomenal, right? And good on you for understanding. He got one bounced. He got bounced in the first round of the playoffs, right? And he could have, gone out and tried to acquire another veteran to make his team better. He said a lot of his wide receivers got hurt, I guess, so he lost in the first round because he had no wide receivers on his team. And he made an executive decision to tear this thing down and rebuild. And good thing he did, because Kamara, Aaron Jones, and Miles Sanders were his top 3 running backs. And I think we would both agree that those guys are either in their primes or they're going to be depreciating relatively soon. So if we were not to win again next year, we could be looking at a situation where those guys have lost significant value.
Yeah, and we could we could just put the 3 trades simultaneously on the screen because they're just absolutely absurd. First one gets McCaffrey, Deontay, and 2 firsts for fucking Kamara, Sanders, Mooney, Wentz, and Beasley. Also, let's just, I don't want to throw any shade on somebody, but Balake 11. Balake, you traded McCaffrey a first and a second for Kamara and Beasley? Okay. Blockbuster 100%.
That's you know what the funny thing is that's the worst of the trade. Like, that's the one he got the least amount of return on, because the second trade, and he said he acquired Jonathan Taylor some other way. I don't know how. He didn't give me any details, but he said he used Aaron Jones and some other pieces to acquire Jonathan Taylor. But this is what he got for Jonathan Taylor, because he then turned around and flipped Jonathan Taylor. And this is what he got. He got a exciting young receiver in Terrace Marshall. He got, a somewhat exciting solid RB in Trey Sermon, and he got 4 1s for Jonathan Taylor on top of that, right? I love Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be phenomenal. If Jonathan Taylor ends up being the Dynasty overall 101 next year, he still won this trade. He still won this trade.
It's just absurd, the type of value. This is what I talk about, getting appreciating assets. As good as Jonathan Taylor is, he is a consensus top 5 pick right now in Dynasty Startup. Even if he comes out and has a CMC-esque year next year, his value can only go up 4 overall placements in Dynasty. You just literally shipped a guy that is probably going to hold value for the next few years for 4 first-round picks.
3 in the next 2 years, too. 2 next year.
2 in 2022. Terrace Marshall, who we both really enjoy. We both have him as a early to mid-second round type of value in Superflex drafts in one quarterback, as this is, I believe you said, right?
Yeah.
He'd be an end of the first round type of value. So stole him there. And then Trey Sermon, who, yes, he's not Jonathan Taylor. He's not that much in terms of upside, but could he be a solid RB2, 3 type at least this year, and maybe an RB2 for the foreseeable future? I absolutely see that being the case given the financial and draft capital investment the 49ers put into him. So
he could turn into Carlos Hyde, right? We saw what Kyle Shanahan did with Carlos Hyde. He could turn into that. And Carlos Hyde, if you've had Carlos Hyde for the last 6 years in Dynasty, I mean, he's been solid for you. He's had a couple RB1 seasons.
Absolutely. And we can get through the final deal. And this is...
Yeah, he just raked this guy over the coals. This one he won. I've never seen a trade won harder than this in my life. But
talk about, real quick, talk about super teams only as his name. Yeah, you're building a fucking super team here with these moves you're making, because as much as I love McCaffrey, as I mentioned with Jonathan Taylor, there is literally no space for him to go up. He's never going to overtake in a superflex format Mahomes at the 101.
And this is a one quarterback, so he's never getting past 101 where he was picked probably.
And you just flipped him and Higgins. I do like Higgins, but realistically here, Higgins and Ayuk is probably a wash, give or take, in terms of value. So you basically flipped, and let's just say for a hypothetical that Brevin Jordan's the third. I know the third's probably worth a little bit more. Let's just say that for easy sake. You got J.K. Dobbins, 4 firsts and a second for CMC. I just talked about I would take Gibson in 2 first, and I thought that was a robbery. You got.
I think Gibson's a little bit better than Dobbins, but yeah, three first. If someone offered me 3 firsts and Dobbins for CMC, I would gladly take that. If I got 2 firsts and Dobbins, I would take it
easily. And you got 4.
Yeah.
But anyways, we can stop giving you a little praise, but hopefully you enjoyed that little part of the segment. Let's go on to Flungers here, and you can start this one off here.
Yeah, and we got kind of the complete opposite perspective, right? Because Flungers went all in, right? He just finished this startup draft, right? It's a super flex league, and you can see the players that he took, right? Very in their prime assets, right? You got Nick Chubb, Zeke Elliott, Russell Wilson, Stephon Diggs, Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, George Kittle, Cooper Kupp. All these guys are going to be great for fantasy this season, right? These guys are all going to be great for fantasy this year. But, some of these guys are 26, 27, 28 years old. Some of them are running backs, and we are waiting on contract situations for some of them in Nick Chubb's case. So you clearly went all in, right? And in doing so, he sold his 1 to 3, his first, second, and third round pick in 2022. And he just has his 2023 first left. So he doesn't have his second, third, or fourth round pick in 2023. And his team is good, right? He's got a team that can compete this year. But here's the problem. In a super flex format, you're lacking at quarterback, man. You're putting a lot of faith in Jordan Love.
Yeah, I mean, am I confident in saying this is going to be a top 3 team?
Yes, I am.
With the quarterback situation, I can't.
I can. With this year, I think you can get by with Jared Goff and Russell Wilson, and the rest of your team can carry your team because you have 2 of the top, 6 running backs or 8 running backs in redraft. You have 4 receivers that are all in my top 12 right there with MT, Diggs, Evans, and Kupp. And then you have one of the best tight ends in fantasy too. So I think you can absolutely compete this year. The problem is after this year, what are we looking at, right? Because if Jordan Love is not the guy or whatever the case is, then you need 2 quarterbacks because I'd imagine Jared Goff probably isn't the starting quarterback in Detroit very much longer either. So, and you don't have a first round pick to replace that quarterback in 2022. So you could be really looking at a rough situation from a quarterback perspective. If you could somehow figure out your QB situation and acquire a young quarterback, then I would try and do that. I don't know how you're going to do it. Maybe you want to sell high on Stephon Diggs, maybe, and try and get a quarterback in that respect. Because if you sold Stephon Diggs for a young quarterback, I'm trying to think of who would be appropriate value. I don't know, Joe Burrow.
I was even thinking, what if you could say the person who ended up with Brady? Oh, actually, to be fair, this was just after the startup. I was going to say maybe you could flip Love and oh, he doesn't have any picks. Love and a depth piece for Brady. I would suggest something like that. But
yeah, just to hold down your QB spot for the next year or two until you get your first back.
I'm assuming though, because he just finished the startup, that Brady's probably on a contender anyway, so you're probably not going to get him for that regardless. But Yeah, the only real thing here, again, you have very good talent at the wide receivers position, specifically top end talent at the running back position. My main thing is just you got the quarterback 2 spot's going to be a problem at some point this year. It's going to be. It's going to be in a super flex draft. Even just, let's just say hypothetically, Goff performs well as a fringe top 20 quarterback.
He's like Derek Carr has always been. Let's just assume he's Derek Carr.
You would need things to break fully right here, because as much as I like Jordan Love as a prospect, we don't even know if he's going to get game time. And you cannot compete in a super flex format without having 3 viable quarterbacks. I learned that the hard way. I had probably one of the best teams ever assembled that you'll ever see, but it relied on it relied on 1 quarterback all year. I'll get into that, but I wasn't able to win with it. And it had like McCaffrey, Kamara, Carson. Like, it was receivers with Terry McLaurin. Like, it was a great team.
And you have Dalvin Cook too.
I flipped him for Kamara.
Right.
But regardless, yeah, it was a freaking stacked team. Christian McCaffrey as well. Like, it was a ridiculous Ezekiel Elliott. It was a ridiculous team. But because I didn't have that quarterback security behind it, I didn't win with it. So that's my one thing. I'm talking from a personal touch here. You got to figure out that quarterback 3, because it's going to kill you.
Diggs is the recipe to do that. Because Diggs' value is, I mean, sure, it could get a bit higher, I guess, but it's at its peak right now. Like, and I'm not saying like sell Diggs because he's at peak value, because he's obviously still going to be phenomenal next year, but he can net you a good quarterback in return. If you wanted to sell Stephon Diggs, you could probably get Joe Burrow plus or Joe Burrow or better. You might even be able to get like a guy like, I'm trying to think who's a bit better than Joe Burrow. I'm trying to rack my brain right now.
Justin
you
Fields.
Wanted to go after one of... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just making a joke. I said Justin Fields because I do have him higher.
I don't have him higher than Joe Burrow. I have him in like the same tier, but either way, you could maybe get a Trevor Lawrence. I don't know. Like, you could go for someone like that with Stephon Diggs. But yeah, that'd be my only suggestion. Maybe you could do what Danny said, and maybe like week 3 of the season, the guy who was Tom Brady is, getting destroyed, and you could go and acquire a guy like Tom Brady or maybe even Matt Ryan or something like that, or Matthew Stafford, and try and just get to that 2023 season with your quarterbacks intact, and then address it in the 2023 draft. Or at that point, maybe you have a young quarterback, maybe Jordan Love is coming into his own or something like that. But you got to figure out your QB situation for this year, because Jared Goff as your QB2 probably won't fly.
Yeah, absolutely. So you think we can get on to Tannecore, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, let's move on to Tannecore.
Take it away with Tannecore's team.
Yeah, and this is an orphan, right? So he didn't do this. This is not his doing.
Do not flame him in the comments right now. He took this over, okay? And don't just say the main advice should be give the team back. Anyway, take it away.
Yeah, so you guys can see his team is bad, right? He's got Nyheim Hines as his RB1. He's got T.Y. Hilton as his wide receiver 1, and Evan Ingram as his tight end 1. So his team is terrible. He is selling pieces, right? Like, that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to go out and get as much draft capital as he can, because this is clearly a 2023, 2024 potentially and beyond type of situation. Your real only cornerstone asset, and this is a 1 quarterback league too. This is not a super flex league. So Joe Burrow, like, he still has a lot of value as a young quarterback, but because you have Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow loses value because you can only start one of them. And Kyler Murray is a great asset. I might try and sell him, to be honest, because I know he's a young player and he'll probably still be, a viable starting quarterback, and he might be like one of the best QBs in the league 2 to 3 years from now. But Kyler Murray right now has very high value. You could get out from him right now and acquire some more draft capital, because you only have 2 firsts in 2022 and you only have 4 in 2023. In my opinion, based on this roster, whoever you took this over from did a terrible job of selling players, because they should have 8 to 10 first round picks in the next 2 years based on this team, unless they drafted terribly last year.
Yeah, I don't know what this is. Like, I'm going to be straight blunt with you, because I want you guys to get as much as you can from it. But this team is bare of assets for what the state of that roster is. I mean, T.Y. Hilton, the wide receiver 1, Nyheim Hines, the running back 1. And yeah, the only real position that you have depth is at the quarterback position, which is the least valuable position in a 1 quarterback league. At least you got some draft capital. I mean, those 4 firsts in 2023 especially are going to help, especially if those are high firsts, and assuming you still have your own first in the next couple of years. Those are going to be the 101 each of the next 2 years. What I would do, again, if a guy like Marvin Jones starts having a good start and a contender wants to give you a late second or an early third for him, I would do something like that. Evan Ingram, if he has a good start this year and somebody's like, oh, maybe he's the Evan Ingram of old and you can get a late second, early third for him, I would take that. Naeem Hines, Chase Edmonds, you get it by this point.
Anybody that you could sell for any amount of draft capital, sell them.
Anybody who even shows a glimpse of a flash this year, you sell them. Okay? But anyways, we're done ripping you because you didn't do this to this team. But I have much respect for you to being able to crack your knuckles, roll the sleeves up, and take over an orphan in the state that this team is in.
Right. So, I hope you kept your receipt too, because I might have been like, yeah, I'm not taking over this orphan personally, because this is a big time, rebuild that you got on your hands. This is 2023, 2024 type of shit that you're dealing with. So again, anyone you can sell, like 3 of these players, let's say 2 of your running backs and 1 of your wide receivers, become like a top 24, top 36 option this year, sell them, get rid of them, because you're not going to be able to use them anytime soon. Might as well just load up on draft capital as much as you can. By 2023, reassess your situation. Be like, okay, so I'm going into my 2023 rookie draft. Let's say you have 5, 6 first round picks at that point. Do I have any cornerstone pieces on my roster, right? Like, do I have, 4 or 5 cornerstone pieces? Then I can start selling for some younger pieces, some of my picks. I don't have to use all my draft picks.
I'm glad you said that too, honestly. As much as I think the 2022 class is decent as well, and everybody knows kind of what the 2023
trade
class
back
is.
In the 2022 class.
Because you have 4 firsts in 2023. If you're, say, first of all, like your first should be the 101. So depending on what type of offer you can get, I'm selling that pick regardless. Like if you can get an offer where you get 2 firsts in 2023 and a second in 2023, I would do that in terms of the state of your roster. Those 2022 picks, promise me right now you're not going to use them if you get a decent enough offer to move back. Because that's what I'm doing. I'm moving back. I'm getting first and seconds. I'm building for 2023, 2024 to finally actually make this team somewhat competable, because right now it's not going to compete for 2022. Maybe for 2023, given that you have those 4 firsts. But even in 2023, cool, they're going to be entering their rookie year. I don't think you're going to be able to compete by then.
Right.
I think this is a team that at minimum is going to be able to compete 2024.
Right. Yeah. And at that point, you gotta acquire as much draft capital as you can. The next 2 drafts. Yes. Luckily, these next 2 drafts should be quite good. Should be able to acquire some great young talent, and you can move on from there. So Alex Rivero's trade. This one should be quick. He just sent a DM to both of us on Twitter. He said that he watched our Dynasty wide receiver rankings and said it was a great video. Appreciate that, Alex. He said, I wanted your opinion on a trade that I'm being offered in my Dynasty League. He is offering him Chris Godwin, Dallas Goedert, a 2022 second and a 2022 third for his DK Metcalf and a 2023 second. So he goes, would you take that? I'm inclined to say yes, but I wanted somebody else's opinion. And he said, thanks. And he enjoys the channel and stuff. So we appreciate that. I would gladly take that deal for DK Metcalf, gladly, because I have expressed my concerns over and over again with DK Metcalf's quarterback situation. I don't think this Russell Wilson wants to be traded thing is going away anytime soon. The only way it'll go away is if the Seahawks win the Super Bowl this year.
The only thing I'll say here is if he offered that to you, my counter would be take off the 3rd round on your part and take off you giving him the 2023 second. So it's basically Godwin, Goddard, and a second for Metcalf straight up. That's the only bugaboo I would say, because giving up the 2023 second is a little bit expensive comparatively to getting a 2022 third. Aside from that, you're mentioning Godwin, top 15 wide receiver in Dynasty for us. Dallas Goedert, top 8 tight end. You're profiting
More
a 3rd round pick.
He's a tier break at tight end too, in my opinion. Yeah. He's one of the last tight ends I feel comfortable projecting the next couple of years, and that I think he'll be really good this year to the point that you can rely on him week in and week out, because there's not a lot of tight ends that you can rely on week in and week out outside of those top 3 guys.
Yep, absolutely. So overall, hopefully you watch this. Go make that trade because or try to do that alteration.
I think his other tight end was Mike Gesicki or something like that. His current best tight end is Mike Gesicki. So that's a big time upgrade to your tight end core. I would absolutely make that trade, because I don't see a big difference between Chris Godwin and DK Metcalf. There is a difference. I would rather have Metcalf, but it's not that big in my opinion. And Goddard alone is almost enough to make up that difference, let alone the fact that you're going to get 2 picks out of it. One of them being a 2022 second next year.
For sure. So, and then we'll get into the final analysis that we'll do here. So you guys can see on the screen, Lumber 149, and I can read this one off. He has at quarterback Kyler Murray, Trey Lance, and Sam Darnold in particular. You also have Trask and Taylor there, but more so fodder, especially Kyle Trask. Shout out Tampa Bay Bucks, second round
big
pick.
Time fodder.
Running back, I mean, I really like the situation you're in.
It's like he took a my guys list, except for Leonard Fournette, and just like drafted all my favorite running backs.
Literally, though. And then a wide receiver, he smashed it too. Terry McLaurin.
I've took a lot of my favorite wide receivers too.
Yeah. And that tight end, you got Irv, another one of our guys. So you can tell he watches the channel based off some of the picks. So real quick shout out there for Lumber. And he basically says here, this is a 10-team Superflex tight end premium. So his 2 questions: overall analysis of the squad, your thoughts on it. Well, you know our thoughts on it. You watch the videos. We've interacted multiple times. Like 75, 80% of the guys you have on our team are guys that we have talked about exclusively in videos. Like, heck, even Jared Dokes, I made a deep sleepers video on, and he was one of my favorite deep sleepers. Love
Shy
that.
Smith, Khalil Herbert too. Like, these are guys we've talked about as sleepers before. So yeah, like even Hunter Renfrow was like in our late round values in Dynasty Startup. Yeah, like this dude pays attention. So we definitely appreciate the support. Basically, you put all your faith in our opinions based on these draft picks, and Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson's the start that, I mean, like, I love that start to a dynasty draft because I love both players.
Yep. And the question too, again, we can kind of go through this, but since I'm built very young, what are some things I should look to do as far as improving my team? And honestly, I mean, I would just kind of let this mature. And if somebody's willing to overpay for McLaurin or Cooper at the deadline, maybe I consider an offer there. But aside from that, I'm just letting this team marinate because you're oozing with young talent here.
Right. And somehow you got Kyler Murray, Cam Akers, and Antonio Gibson in the first 3 rounds of your draft. And all 3 of those guys should be top 15 picks, in my opinion. So
absolutely.
Like getting that high end value at the top of your draft can definitely help you, kickstart a rebuild. Because I would say this isn't really a rebuild. It's like we'll see what happens this year. In 2022, I should be able to win a championship.
Yep, absolutely. So any closing thoughts on here, or can we get out?
No, I think we're good to go. I think thank you guys again for the participation. We always appreciate that. We will come at you tomorrow with the second part of this. Anybody who DM'd Danny pretty much is going to be on the second part of this. Yeah. Most of the people that DM'd me are on the first part of this. So if you DM'd me, you're probably in this video. If you DM Danny, you're going to be in the next video. So
and
if you guys made it to
I'll quickly say one thing. Don't just take that as a thing that every single week whoever DMs Bush is going to be first, because guess what? We're going to be randomizing who gets on and who not. So got to keep you guessing. But yeah, because I'll tell you what, Bush, if we just left it off like that, I'm sure you get 30 messages next week. Just
probably,
to get on the first episode.
That's probably true. So if you guys made it to this point in the video, comment down below productive struggle, because that one guy in particular, he's going to be going through a productive struggle for a couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. His kids might be in elementary school by the time he's competing.
Right.
But anyways, sorry, I had to just make that last joke. Again, appreciate you guys. Productive struggle down below. Anyways, we will see you tomorrow for the second part of Dynasty Decisions this week. Take care. Love you all. Peace out.
Why you need the money?